Well, a very warm welcome to the start of this afternoon's live broadcasting for the WPP-BAV Alibaba 11/11 Global Shopping Festival. I'm delighted to introduce our first guest of the afternoon, who is Christina Fontana, who is the head of fashion and luxury at Tmall, the luxury division, Europe and the US for Alibaba Group. A very, very warm welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, David. I've been watching your episodes for the last few days, and it's been super interesting and informative. So thank you for allowing me to join the conversation.
Thank you very much indeed for saying so, and it's nice that you're at this end of the camera for the next half an hour. Well, I suppose here's a little bit of a non sequitur in a sense. I think when a lot of people think about 11/11, they don't think about luxury. So I think that's really what we'll like to explore, because that's definitely not the case. So, but before we do that, perhaps you can just let us know, I mean, has luxury had a good last 12 months?
In China, we've had online, a very, very interesting last 12 months. Of course, I think there's two key factors when we're looking at China. Number one, of course, is the acceleration in digitization that we've seen over the last year. And number two, and this will come up often in our conversation today, is the fact that Chinese luxury consumers that usually consume outside of China are in China. So there is a lot more consumption happening locally. But even if we look at just one number, I'll give you, is the penetration of online purchases in luxury has grown exponentially in the last year. So for some brands, we're up to 30%, some are just, down at the 7-8%, but overall it's 23% of online purchases for luxury goods. So I think that really is one number that gives us an idea of how important the online commerce has become for luxury brands.
I mean, that is quite extraordinary when you consider how sort of late the luxury players got into digital for good and bad reasons.
Yeah, but we say they came late. We launched Luxury Pavilion 3 years ago. We had 17 brands. Today we have 200 brands that are participating in the 11/11. So one thing about luxury that I think I've learned over the last 2 years is they might be slow to start. We're talking about brands that do things on a 100-year scale. They're not worried so much maybe about what's happening this year, but when they do things, they do it exceptionally well. And this is played out in how they have adopted to digital. So I think even though they came late to the game, when we talk about the things that they're doing for 11/11 or what they're doing generally in marketing online in China, we'll see that they have leaped ahead of the fold and are doing really exciting things.
Now, I suppose another one of the myths with 11/11, and I suppose it's a function of history given where it started in terms of sort of deep discounts to start. One of the myths is that in order to sell anything during 11/11, you have to offer deep discounts. The luxury players during 11 don't offer discounts at all. Is that correct?
Well, each brand is free to determine their marketing strategy on Tmall. Remember that it is always the brand that decides their strategy, their pricing, their products when they're doing any kind of activity on Tmall. So in fact, you're correct. Most of the luxury brands do not use discounts as a way to engage their consumers. But I think, you had Chris Tung on the other day, and he was talking about how we changed the name of 11/11 a few years ago to talk about a global shopping festival. And I think what we see luxury brands doing and where they're exceptionally good is really about creating this excitement, offering something new to their consumers that they only have online at this particular time of year. It's also extremely important for luxury brands because if you think about the Super Bowl in an offline environment, it's when we have the most eyeballs looking at the screen. So the Double 11 period is when we have the highest amount of traffic throughout the year on our platforms. So brands can use this traffic in many different ways. Of course, everybody would like to make sales, but it's also about increasing your brand following, increasing awareness of your brands. We'll talk a little bit about how important consumers outside of tier 1 and 2 tier cities are. So it's really a moment in the year when brands can delight consumers, especially new consumers, with all kinds of content and incentives that aren't a discount.
And to that point, I suppose given that the brands themselves have viewed 11.11 maybe in a slightly different way, but in a way that meets their own both brand objectives and strategy, and as you say, to maximize the eyeballs that are available over that period. What have you done as a platform in order to create environments that the luxury brands feel comfortable to play in?
Well, we created the Tmall Luxury Pavilion 3 years ago. And if you look at it online, you'll see it's a beautiful environment. Unfortunately, most people that are watching us today probably don't spend very much time looking at Tmall. But when you look at the Luxury Pavilion, it's beautifully curated. It has fantastic content, so short videos, live streaming, AR, VR, all of these technologies that we've developed over the last 3 years to help luxury brands engage their consumers in new ways. And one thing that we've seen throughout the last few years, of course, driven also by the pandemic, is there's an incredible channel that we have now on Tmall Luxury that allows me to tell my brand story, tell my history, watch my short videos. It's almost more engaging than what I will have in store. So they're two complementary experiences. I can see, visit a brand factory. I can see a Swiss watchmaker and how he actually creates his brand, creates his products. And then when I go in the store and touch and feel and I'm interacting with a sales assistant, I have a very different understanding of what the brand is about and how they create their products. So it's really creating this environment where we can share as much as possible about our brand directly to the consumers.
So to what extent are consumers then doing their discovery on those platforms and then going into the stores at a later stage in the buyer behavioral model? Because in a sense, that's probably the reverse of what one expects the consumer shopping journey to be for luxury.
So there's something very important about that experience on Tmall. So we have a few things that make it very, very engaging. We started live streaming heavily during the lockdown because this was the only way that even sales assistants could speak with their consumers. And many of these activities that people started doing when they were home, they have continued doing. But live streaming for luxury brands is different, perhaps, than what we think about, Mr. Lipstick's buy, sell, sell, sell. It's really about sharing the history and the craftsmanship of these brands. So, like you said, it is a lot about discovery. And in fact, before 11.11, we revamped a little bit the luxury pavilion so that we can make the discovery piece much easier, highlighting new products and new events from our brand partners so that every time a consumer comes onto Tmall Luxury Pavilion, they immediately see what is new and most engaging for them.
So maybe you could help give us a feel of, we've talked a lot about live streaming over the course of the last few days, naturally. It's impossible to ignore when the premier live streamers do 20 billion RMB. What is the difference between a sort of a mainstream product live stream versus a luxury live stream? Is it a tonal difference? Is it a content difference? Is it an audience difference?
It goes across all of the things that you just mentioned. It goes from set design to merchandise curation, which are the right pieces that I want to be showing to my consumers at this time. It goes to the brand voice. So who is speaking about my brand and what tone of communication am I using with my followers? And I'd like to also speak about another type of live streaming that we don't think about so much that brands have adopted, luxury brands have adopted in the last few months. We're used to thinking about live streaming being about getting as many people as possible to look at the same thing at the same time and buy it. We have started with our luxury brands making private live streaming sessions. So this will allow very selected number of very important customers dial in and connect directly with important people for the brand, maybe a designer or the leading sales assistant, the president, to talk about their products. And in this case, we'll have maybe just, 6 to 10 people on the call, and they can really delve into what these products mean for the people. And the most final thing about live streaming that I think is really important is this idea of sharing, right? When I'm in that live streaming room of just 6 to 8 other people, it is a joint experience. It's something that I am doing with other people that I'm online with. And I can show it to my friends. I can share it with my friends. I can say, hey, look at this. I'm in this live streaming room. Come and watch with me. So it's really also about an interactivity that we might not always have. Yes, I can go shopping with my girlfriends, but it's a little bit different than just doing it online and sharing that experience as well.
Well, it sounds a little bit like Back to the Future, an old-fashioned European salon in the back in time, but digitized on steroids.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perhaps you could also now give us a little feel for, we understand a little bit more about the platform that the luxury brands can operate in. Give us a little bit of an understanding of what the luxury brands are actually doing this year for 11/11.
This year for 11/11, we've had so many exciting things that I need to pick just a few because otherwise we'll get carried away.
Yeah, go for your favorites.
Exactly. Well, we've already mentioned the live streaming. I think something that is everybody's talking about, so I'm going to go ahead and mention it to you. People talk a lot about the metaverse. It's our hot topic. It's what we're supposed to talk about at cocktail parties today. But how is that actually playing out, and how are people already engaging with that? And what are some of the things that we've done at Tmall that can allow brands to start playing with this idea and understanding how it can help them engage with their consumers? So this year, we have done a few things. We have a virtual idol. So instead of using an actual KOL, we have created a virtual idol, which can actually sit down and talk to people, almost like what we're doing now, being in 2 different places with a green screen. We can do the same thing with our virtual idol. So this has really allowed brands to play around with that, and it's it looks like a real person. I don't know if you've seen it. I think you have a session on it. So if anyone hasn't seen it, they should take a look. But it goes beyond that. We had a digital art gallery that was connected with that, where many brands, we had Burberry, Balmain, Armani participated in this, where they had sold products, but that were connected to a digital artwork. I'm not a technology person, so I'm not going to say if this was NFT, if it's blockchain, whatever. Doesn't matter. It is an exclusive digital piece of artwork that was sold together with a physical good. So we have integrated all of these things into an experience. And what's very important about that when we're talking about Tmall is that we have already 900 million consumers that are on our platform and are engaging in these things all at the same time. So it's a metaverse activity where I can actually share it with others. It's not confined to my single platform. So it's really been an exciting piece that the brands have started to engage with. And this is something that's very important about Alibaba for all brands, not just for the luxury brands, but we create technologies and help brands learn how to integrate them, use them, and have them become an integral part of their marketing and communication strategy. So yes, the things we're doing today, they're little dabblings into what the future will look like, but it's a great new way for brands to connect with their consumers.
I mean, it does seem to me that we can call it what we like, but let's call it the metaverse for the moment. The technologies that you have been working with and the brands are working with now, it feels like where we are now is where we were with live streaming 2 years ago. The very sort of beginnings. 2 years ago, live stream was just starting. Last year it was massive. This year it's gigantic. Do you see the same with the virtual sort of world?
I do, and this is why it's so important for brands to work with a company like Alibaba. Creating that technology for any brand, I don't care if it's a luxury brand, if it's a huge mass market brand, they're not going to create these kind of technologies in-house. We create technologies every day and we kind of test them out with our brand partners. That's a lot of engineering, investment, development of new products and resources. So by working together, a technology company with the brands, we're able to kind of create something that ends up providing value for everybody in the ecosystem, us, the brands, and our consumers. So it's really a playground, Tmall, and that's really important for brands to be involved in.
And how willing are the luxury brands to experiment in that sort of space? I mean, you said before that sometimes the luxury brands are slower to get involved in new things, but once they got involved, they put their foot on the accelerator and use their vast resources at a much faster rate. Are they very willing to do that? And I suppose the question is, if the answer is yes, why is that? Is it because they see that those environments are a really good fit for the tone of voice of their brands?
I think what's really made a difference is, yes, it took many luxury brands a long time to join Tmall, but we firmly believe that no luxury brand should join us until they're ready to go what we call all in. It's a famous phrase that we use all the time in Alibaba. But once they do go all in, they are super excited, and they are actually the brands that have resources to try something new. And even if you look outside, I won't talk about Alibaba or even China, but if you look at some of the leading, kind of dabbling in new technologies, it is the luxury brands that are doing it. Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, all of these brands have done really interesting activities around the digital future. So once they start, they have the creativity and the ability to create new things that I think really marries very well with testing out these new technologies.
And what would you say? I mean, you've been looking after this sector for a little while. You've got an interesting longer term perspective. What would you say typifies the luxury sector's approach to 11/11 this year versus previous years?
I think that we've started focusing on two things. One thing that has become very important and very evident in China in the last period is the importance of consumers outside of our tier 1, tier 2 cities. 88% of growth in the luxury sector in China is coming from new luxury consumers. So people that are making their first time purchase of luxury. So it's very important that they can expand their reach throughout China. If you know about physical footprints, many of them do not have stores if you go into more rural China or smaller towns in China. But through the digital channels, they've really been able to captivate this new audience and teach them about their brands. Because, China very well too, so you know that perhaps in the smaller towns, people's exposure to luxury brands before they were online was whatever maybe their local, multi-brand store was telling them. They didn't get the whole picture of what was the brand, what was the DNA. So now that brands are playing on our platform, they can really reach out into China and connect with these newer consumers. And I think the other thing that we've really been working on and learning about together is that China is obviously a huge market. So there is not one Chinese consumer. There are many, many Chinese consumers. And I think brands this year have really moved from, yes, I'm online and I'm going to start doing these things, but to start understanding how there are different target audiences, different personas that are interacting with their brand. And they want different kinds of communications and different ways to interact with a brand. And we can do that. So I mentioned, private live streaming room, that might be appropriate for a certain age group and a certain kind of consumer. While, a young urban consumer is absolutely going to want the live streaming with the super famous, bye KOL. So the opportunity to really look at our target audiences and adapt our communication to them has been very important as luxury brands develop in their use of Tmall.
Now, you touched on it. One of the other misperceptions, I suppose, is that consumers within what are called the lower tier cities, although I think we are going to have to find another nomenclature for how we describe these various different cities in China. But there is the misperception that those consumers can't afford and actually aren't interested in luxury. That's far from the case, isn't it?
It's absolutely far from the case. And the numbers tell us many things. These aren't Alibaba numbers. The number that 88% of new luxury consumers is an Oliver Wyman report that just came out. I'm sure you guys have your research too. and we have lots. There's many interesting things about this cohort of new consumers. First of all, they have higher disposable income because the cost of living in these cities is often less expensive than in, Beijing or Shanghai. So they have more disposable income. They are very interested in luxury goods. They have a different approach to these products. They're more influenced by what their peer group is purchasing. So I mentioned somebody in Shanghai is going to want to see a super famous KOL. We call them small town youth, so we don't need to use the tier denomination anymore. But our small town youth are more influenced perhaps by what their peer group is doing. So having that live streaming where people are actually interacting and they're seeing what other people are saying about the brand is very, very helpful to drive appreciation.
And finally, perhaps you can just give us a perspective on what brands in the, let's call it the non-luxury sector, those brands that operate across a wider spectrum, what can they learn from the way in which luxury brands have been using the Tmall platform for this year's 11/11?
My number one point that I always like to talk about, because I don't only take care of luxury brands, is, price. But goes back to basic marketing. Price shouldn't be your most important lever when you're trying to communicate with your consumers. So oftentimes smaller brands, I know we've spoken a lot about smaller brands, they'll be working with a TP in China, they'll be working with a partner. The partner will tell them, oh, let's, do a huge discount. Of course, that's a really easy way to drive quick sales. It works everywhere in the world. Put the stuff on sale, somebody's going to buy it. It should really, though, be about creating long-term loyalty, building up brand awareness, building up your fans and followers. This is super important and something that we have already been working on very much with the luxury brands, the idea of creating a base of fans and followers. And in fact, we've moved on from that. We've created the base of fans and followers. Once I have it, what am I going to do with it? One of the things that we've really been focusing now is loyalty. A lot of people speak about how Chinese consumers can be a bit fickle and it's hard to create loyalty. So once we've created a fan base of followers and people that are interested in our brands, it's important to create loyalty. And the last thing that I would say that is true for all brands is there shouldn't be a competition between what I'm doing online and what I'm doing offline. I put my consumer at the center. My consumers now, if I'm doing business in China, my consumers are online for a large part of their day. This is where I'm going to communicate with them. And this is not about cannibalizing the other channels. It's about creating an experience that will go through, store, online, short video, AR, VR, everything to create a world for our fans.
Well, very wise advice. Thank you very much indeed. Maybe next year we'll have this conversation. It'll be the two of our metaverse avatars in a luxury pavilion having the conversation, and we can take the afternoon off. But for the moment, Christina Fontana, the head of luxury and fashion for Tmall Global and the US for Alibaba. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, David.